Hi, I'm Anna Hoffman, and welcome to this episode of Data Exposed Live. Thanks for joining us today, whether you're joining from Stream or from Learn TV, Twitch, Twitter, or YouTube. We are happy to have you on our live show today, where we stream every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific. So without further ado, we're going to get started in talking about this latest episode. And before I bring on our very special speakers for today, I wanted to just call out that wherever you're streaming from at any point in the show, please do add your questions, comments, say hi, just talk to us, engage with us, and we have people standing by to answer you on the chat, as well as we can take some live Q&A at the end if there's time. So with that, today we're going to be talking about the SQL Assessment API. And this is something I don't know a ton about, so I'm interested to learn from our speakers, members of the Azure SQL product group. So first speaker I'm going to bring up is Ebru. And Ebru, thanks so much for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Hi, Anna. Hi, everyone. I'm a program manager in SQL Server Team. I've been with the team for 25 years, so I worked on different parts of the product in various roles. I've been focusing on assessments for the last couple of years, so that's what I'm going to show you today.
Awesome. Thanks, Ebru. And next, I'm going to bring up Alex. Alex, thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, I'm Alex, and I'm working with Ebru on SQL assessment and on SQL management packs stuff. So I'm just kind of lead of this team.
Awesome. Great. We're happy to have you and see some cool demos later. And finally, last but not least, we have Aleksei. Thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do? Oh, Aleksei, I think you're on mute.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Aleksei. I'm a developer on the SQL Assessment API team. So I write the code.
A very important job, I would say. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, you guys, for joining me today. We have an exciting show planned. We're going to learn a lot about the SQL assessments and how you can do them in different ways and how they work and what they mean. And even I've heard some tips around customizations. So with that, I'm going to, just focus in on Ebru. Ebru, can you just start by telling our viewers a little bit more about the SQL assessments and why they're important and what they are and how we get started?
Sure, yeah. So you might have a SQL Server or either on premises or on Azure VMs, or you might have Azure SQL Managed Instance, and you might be asking yourself, is my server configured correctly? Am I following best practices guidelines? Am I set up for success, basically? So we're trying to help you answer that question. That's the whole reason for SQL Assessment API. So let me talk about what we built for you to answer that question. So we built SQL Assessment API, which is an API. It's part of SMO, Server Management Objects. And we also have two PowerShell commands that's part of SQL Server PowerShell module. But if scripting is not your cup of tea, if you prefer a user interface, graphical user interface, we're building that in Azure Data Studio as an extension as well, so SQL Assessment Extension. SQL Assessment API GA'd in November 2019, so it's been around for a while. The extension went into public preview in June 2020, so it's not it doesn't have the full functionality yet, but it has enough for you to get started using it. So at the heart of, and of course, the extension is built on top of the API itself. So the heart of the API is the rule set that we provide, the default rule set. This is us as SQL Server product team telling you these are our recommendations. But of course, every environment has different needs. So one rule set doesn't work for everybody. So we made it highly customizable and extensible. What that means is that you can disable rules. Certain things will not apply to your environment. You can disable them. You can change thresholds. Some limits will be different for your environment. and you can write your own rules. So this is the customization that Aleksei will demo later on. SQL Assessment API works with all SQL Server versions in support, meaning 2012 and up, both on Windows and Linux. Also for Azure SQL VMs and Azure SQL Managed Instances. So I'll show you, I'll demo how to use the SQL Assessment commandlets. So like I said, we have two commandlets, invoke SQL Assessment and get SQL Assessment item. As you can tell from the names, invoke SQL Assessment does the assessment for the given object. It could be a server, it could be a database, right? It gives you all the recommendations. If you wanted to see what kind of rules would apply to your server or database without running the assessment, then you would use the get SQL Assessment item commandlet. I'll show how to run those in a minute. Let's start by looking at results of an assessment. This will help us understand what's going on, what I'm talking about better. So I did an assessment on my SQL Server on my machine, and also on 3 databases on my machine. As you can see here, this is for demo purposes. Obviously, you wouldn't run it on your master. And I saved the results, and I built a simple Power BI report on top of it. I'm no Power BI expert, so this is a simple report, but it just helps you see what's available. I got 189 recommendations on my server and 3 databases. This is when I ran it earlier. And I can see that I have 1 critical recommendation, a lot of warnings, and a handful of informational stuff. So let's look at the critical recommendation, right? That's important. I don't want to miss something there. So its ID is query weight, not default. What is this about? Here's a message to tell you more about it. It says your option query weight is set to 7,500. You should really set it to -1. And increasing the wait time may increase the amount of time for the query to be terminated. If this message is still not clear, we provide a link with every rule, usually to our Docs Online pages. And this page will explain more about, what this option is about, or how to set it to whatever value you want, etc. So we have some more information coming here. We know that this rule is coming from Microsoft ruleset. Like I said, you can write your own rules, right? Or you can use rule sets from third parties. So you want to know where a rule is coming from and which version. Let's scroll a bit. We have severities for each rule. And then you know which object this rule applied. So if you ran this across multiple servers, you could group them using this column, or you can tell if this was a server or a database by looking at this column. And we have a timestamp. So if you wanted to run this multiple times and do some historical analysis, you can do that by using the timestamp.
Cool. That's pretty cool. Ebru, just a few questions. This says it has 189 results. Does that mean that there are 189 best practices that we're running against, or are there more and these are the ones that are just being flagged? That's a lot of best practices in one kind of tool.
Yeah. So we have many rules, and not all of them apply to all objects, right? Depending on your server version, platform, etc. Some of the rules will apply, and out of those, your server hit those. Like if we look at some of these, you'll see there are some rules about trace flags. So we have a lot of rules about trace flags on my server. I hit a handful of them, and we'll have rules about deprecated features, etc. So you'll see, like if you use deprecated features in different databases, so you'll see a row for each of those warnings, basically.
Wow, cool. And do people typically run this one time, or is it like something you might run at some sort of frequency? I don't know. Would that be every day, every month, every 6 months?
Yeah, so we expect nothing more frequent than weekly basis, right? So you want to run it, you want to make some changes, fix some stuff. So every organization has their processes, they can deploy things at certain times, etc. Depending on that, depending on how fast you can fix things, every week or so you run it, you look at your results. And if you have better Power BI skills than me, you can have your charts that show progress over time, etc.
Cool. This is really cool. It seems really helpful. It seems like we've taken the power of, the SQL Server's team of years and years of experience and kind of put it into one tool. So really cool.
Exactly. Thanks. Yeah, that's what we wanted to do. Just give you our recommendations. Of course, it's up to you to follow or not. Okay, so how did I get these results? Let's go back and look at some code. So just as a note, I'm in Azure Data Studio. I'm using a notebook because it makes it easy to demo stuff. I can have my text and my code and my results all in one place. But obviously, you would run this in your favorite PowerShell environment, wherever you write your code. To start with, if you've never used it, one-time thing, you have to have the SQL Server PowerShell module on your machine. So you have to run this install module command. After you run that, I did a get module here, so you can see I have SQL Server module with this version on my machine. So this is our commandlet, right? Invoke SQL Assessment. If you want to do just simple one, all you have to do is pass one parameter, what object you want to run this assessment on. So here I'm using the get SQL instance PowerShell commandlet to point at this named instance on my machine and passing it to invoke SQL Assessment command. So sorry, sometimes we hit an issue with this kernel, so I'll just show you over here. So I'm getting the SQL instance on my machine. I'm passing it to invoke SQL Assessment, and here are the recommendations that it fired for my server. So this is kind of what we saw in the report. Like I said, you can run it on your server. You should also run it on your databases. So in this example, I'm getting the master database just for demo purposes on my named instance, and then I'm going to run the assessment on that. It returns only 2 recommendations. There's not much in my master. So the other command that we have is get SQL assessment item. Like I said, this is if you don't want to run the assessment itself, but just want to see which rules would apply to your server. And in this one, I'm using a parameter called check, and I'm telling it only run the checks that are related to backup. So every rule we have tags. So you can say, just run me the performance related rules or backup related or trace flag, whatever. We have a bunch of categories. So just as an example here, I'm going to run this on my instance. So backup related, we have 3 rules here about some trace flags relating to backup that would apply to my server.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know there were tags, so it's cool. You can, kind of choose which rules you want to run. Hey, quick question. This might be a long-winded question, but you're connecting to a local SQL server here. If I wanted to connect to SQL Server and Azure VM, or maybe even Azure SQL Managed Instance, how would I do that, or is that even possible?
Yeah, it's just standard PowerShell commandlets. We're not doing anything fancy there. So as long as you can connect to any SQL server using PowerShell, standard PowerShell commandlets, you can pass that on to our commandlets, then you're good to go. You don't have to worry about that. I think Alex, when he demos the extension, he's connecting to a Azure VM. Yeah, I mean, we do test a lot of things on Azure SQL VMs, so we use that a lot.
Great.
All right. So just running the thing and seeing the results on the screen is fine, but what you really want to do is probably save the results somewhere so you can look at it later on, right? And as SQL people, the easiest way is to save it in a SQL table. So this code example is doing that. So this part is exactly the same. I'm getting my named instance, passing it to the invoke SQL assessment commandlet. I'm using this flatten output parameter, which takes the results of invoke SQL assessment and makes it suitable to be consumed by write SQL table data commandlet. And this is the standard PowerShell commandlet that writes data to a SQL table. And you can store it anywhere you want, right? Anywhere you can connect. In this case, I'm storing it on the same server. And here's my database, here's a schema, and this is the table name. And I'm using this parameter called force. If the table doesn't exist, it creates it the first time this runs. But if the table exists, it appends rows to it. So when I run this against my server, the first time I probably created the table. And then when I run it against the databases, then it appends the recommendations to it. So here I'm using a variable to get all the databases that I care about for this demo, these 3 databases. And then I'm passing this database variable to invoke SQL assessment. I mean, there are multiple different ways you can do this in PowerShell. It's just the way PowerShell works. But you have to pass a server or database object to our commandlet. That's the whole thing. And if we run this over here, this is the exact code I used to save the data. And that's where I ran my Power BI report on top of. So if we go back here, I can show you. This is the SQL Assessment demo database, the results table. This is, it's populating 18 rows so far. The assessment is running. Let's go back here. It usually completes a lot faster than that. Of course, the demo. Okay, it's done. So if you look here, we'll see 190 rows here. This is the table I used the Power BI report to build on, basically. So like I said, you go through Power BI report, you look at your results, and you remember that we had a critical issue, right? Let's make sure. Oops, I didn't mean to run the whole thing. So I want to just check to see, yes, I have a critical recommendation. I have to set the query weight to -1. I don't like this current value. So I learned how to do that from the help link. So I go to my SQL Server. I run this code to change the query weight to -1 as recommended. So then I can run this again. And you see that it's not firing anymore. So for this one, again, we use the check parameter to just run that rule. So, because you're just checking for that rule, you don't need to run the whole thing again.
Cool. So you can go and update it, address any rules, and then kind of as a check or like to make sure you actually did what you thought you did, and you can run it again, but you don't need to run the whole thing. And that's where, running these specific rules comes into play. Very cool.
Exactly. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to show you is our GitHub page. We have an aka.ms SQL Assessment API. If you go to our GitHub page, it has the full rule set, both in its original format, and it's also, we made a CSV file, so it's easier to read. You can scroll right and see all the columns, the tags we talked about, like all the rules are tagged. You can see the descriptions, and some of them are really long. I'm going to quickly scroll. You can see like what kind of platform the rule applies to, what kind of edition, what kind of version. You can see all the SQL Server versions here, etc. All of that information is here. We also have notebooks with like all sorts of different code samples, so you can just go play around with these. And if you want to give us feedback, you can just file an issue and reach us here. Like I said, the rule set is in the GitHub page. It's open, so you can see what kind of rules we already have. And we keep improving those, right? We have a couple of hundred now, but we keep adding more rules as we go along.
Awesome. Very cool. It's kind of nice that they're all out there somewhere, so you can kind of see which rules are being applied. And if you want to use tags, then you know which tags you can even call. So it's great that that documentation is available. And I love that we're moving towards hosting things on GitHub so people can, see the code. And also if they have feedback, it's pretty immediate. They file an issue, you get an email, and we can go from there.
Exactly.
Cool. Awesome, Ebru. So you've shown us the SQL assessment, and you've taught us a little bit about what it is, how it works, how you might surface this in a Power BI report, and how you can run it using PowerShell. Now, I think you mentioned there was also some sort of GUI approach, if I don't want to run PowerShell. Is that right? Exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, Alex can show us how we do that.
Awesome. So I'm going to bring Alex up. Alex, hi. And, can you tell us a little bit more about this, how we might be able to do this not using PowerShell?
Yeah, sure. Data Studio is a modern tool for data professionals, and it supports any kind of SQL Server, including Azure SQL on virtual machines and Azure SQL managed instances. So for us, the decision to provide functionality of SQL assessment to Data Studio was really no-brainer. So can I share my screen? So
let's take a look.
I'll show you how it looks. Okay, so for this demo, I deployed a virtual machine. Actually, it's SQL on virtual machine. And I installed Azure Data Studio on this machine. Any work with any extension in Azure Data Studio starts with a marketplace. So I'm going to marketplace and type assessment in the search bar, and here's SQL assessment. So you can install it right from here. I already installed it, so I can go to Connections tab. And here's my instance of Azure on virtual machine. I right-click on it, pick Manage, and this is SQL Server dashboard. And you can see SQL assessment in the general section. Here it is. So this SQL Assessment Extension, this is how it looks like. It has two tabs, Assessment and History. I will cover both of them. It also has a panel of buttons, and there are two main buttons. They're pretty similar to the PowerShell commandlets that Ebru told us about. So they work pretty the same. I'm going to focus on invoke assessment button. I click it. It will take a few seconds to get the results here. Okay. Here are the results, and you can see results for both SQL Server instance and its databases. So you can see this server icon and this database icon. This results grid has sorting and filtering functionality. So if you want to see the results for instance only, you can choose just instance. And maybe you want to sort the results in order to show warning or something like that about information. So just sort descending, and here we go. What else? Actually, these results are recommendations that we suggest you follow in order to make your SQL Server better performing and more reliable. So this actual recommendation, actual action or step that we recommend you to take. Some tags, all the rules within our default rule set has tags, so you can use tags, for example, to run only trace flag checks, or maybe just checks or rules that performance related ones. And also you can see this detail pane that has some more information about every recommendation. So it has how we call it, display name of the rule. It has recommendation. It also has some short description. It's like a short piece of information why we recommend to do that, and why it may be an issue or anything like that. And also tags, and click here to learn more link. So when you click it and open, you'll get to a related knowledge article where you can get even more information about this rule, or maybe about a related topic.
Cool. This is really cool. It seems like, you're surfacing the same information that we saw from Ebru in the PowerShell, method, but
exactly.
It's a little bit easier to manipulate if you're not,
Sure.
a PowerShell guru.
Yeah, correct. Okay, so we get the results, and now we may want to save them in order to further work or to bring back to them some later, right? So there are three options to do that. The first one is export a script. It works pretty the same as write SQL table data commandlet. So you get a script that will create a table and fill that table out with all the results. Next option is create an HTML report. So when you click it, you need to save it and then open. So just a report, so where all the results grouped by object, instance, or database, or any kind of supported objects like file groups or availability groups, and also grouped by severity levels. And this report, it also has printable layout. So if you decide to print this report, you'll get it nice looking like that. And the last option to get to the previous result is the history tab. So when you click it, you see all the results, all assessments that I performed in this particular instance of Azure Data Studio. You can click any item in this grid. And now you can see the results that were actual at this date at that time in the past.
Cool. That's really cool, because I feel like, if I see a certain number of warnings or critical things, items, and as Ebru mentioned, maybe you do this on a weekly basis, you can come and check, okay, is it the same? And if it's changed, what's changed? And is it kind of like, how do I need to deal with it from there? So that's really, really nice.
Yeah, you can see your progress if you decide to follow these recommendations, right? So what else? Also, there's just two helpful buttons like view rules and learn more on GitHub. So it works like it just open our GitHub page where again you can get more samples of how to modify rules or how to create rules, or to get some more information about SQL Assessment API. And also a P information button, so it just gives you short information on the API itself, like its version, the version of the default rule set, the version of SQL Server instance, etc. Okay, yeah, I guess that's it, what I want to tell you about this extension.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Alex. This was really interesting. And, between you and Ebru, I've really learned a lot about the extension as well as the API, as well as just in general, what kinds of things you guys are trying to do with this set of products. So really appreciate it. I'm going to bring Aleksei up now. Yeah, thank you, Alex. I'm going to bring Aleksei up now. Hi, Aleksei.
Hi.
And, we've talked a lot. I've learned a lot. I think our viewers have learned a lot. But, there's one question I still have. Ebru kind of mentioned that, this is the Microsoft rule set. Now, she also mentioned there might be third-party rule sets, or maybe we could do a custom rule sets. Can you tell us a little bit more about the opportunity or possibilities there?
Yeah, and I will show some examples of custom rule sets. Yeah, I will show it. I will show it in PowerShell. I love PowerShell. And I have a PowerShell variable named DB holding a set of databases for enterprise operations, reporting, and software development, as their names suggest. And if I invoke SQL assessment on this variable to check full backup, and I use standard PowerShell command let select object to remove some clutter from the screen, I will get a list of databases that have outdated full backup. And you can see that the default rule set contains the full backup rule, which checks if the last full backup was made more than 7 days ago. What we can do with this rule, we can change it. For example, the full backup rule has a threshold parameter. And if we want our databases to be backed up every 3 days, not 7, we can just change this parameter for the full backup rule. To do this, I will create a new rule set, which is just a JSON file with 3 mandatory properties and a JSON array named rules, which will contain our new rule. The new rule is a JSON object which overrides the full backup rule and sets the threshold parameter to 3. That's simple like this. I save this JSON file, and now I can invoke SQL assessment on this DB SQL assessment on this DB, we're able to check full backup. And I will pass the file name as additional configuration parameter to this commandlet to let the SQL Assessment API finding my new rule set. And we've got more databases because I've made full backup for some of them 5 days ago. So we've got them. We've got Contoso reporting database, and Fabricam Ops operations database here. And you can see that each database was checked against 3 days now. So we changed the full backup rule for all databases we have.
Okay, cool. This is really cool. Seems like pretty straightforward, pretty easy to actually update some rules if you want to add, for example, different thresholds. Now, I noticed you did this for all of the databases. Is there a way that I can change the rule for some databases, but not all of them?
Yes. And we can differentiate databases by name, for example. And I will make our change for operations databases only. So this does make sense. We don't want reporting databases backed up too often. And to do this, I will just add a regular expression to my rule, regular expression in slashes, which matches each database name ending with OPS. And this regular expression goes to target filter for my rule override. And that's it. I just save this rule set and invoke SQL assessment with the same parameters again. Oh, I have a line 9. Okay, I have removed the threshold. Great. So I have this message pointing exactly the position of the broken rule set. I'll try it again. So you have see Contoso report database has gone because it's okay with 5 days, and only Fabricam Ops database was checked against 3 days rule.
Cool. This is pretty cool, and I also liked the live, error troubleshooting. So these things are live, so these things happen. But it's nice that the PowerShell commands give you that clear direction onto where you might have made a mistake. So pretty cool. Now, one thing I noticed when you were editing the JSON config file, I noticed that it looked like you were overriding, maybe I'm understanding correctly, overriding an existing rule. Now, what if I wanted to create a new rule? Is that something that's possible?
Yes, we can create a new rule. It's looks similar to overriding an existing rule, and I will use just a new rule set, a new JSON file, and I will use a new rule, new JSON object, which at this time defines a new rule named file space. And this rule has a short display name, a nice description, and a message. The message will be shown for each object which violates our rule. I will create a rule that finds all the database files with insufficient free space. So we know the files are allocated on disk and they are used while we use the databases, and they have some free space, and this rule will find the files which are almost full. And the first thing I need a list of database files with their names, sizes, and other numbers. And the rules in SQL Assessment get data from probes. We separate these entities, and I will define a probe that returns a list of all database files with their names. Because another JSON object named probes, and I define a probe DB file space, which is a SQL probe. It just contains a SQL query, which gets file name, available space ratio, total space, and so forth from the database files view. We can create not only SQL probes, but WMI probes or PowerShell probes, which will have WMI query, for example, here. But now I use just SQL probe, and the result set from this query will be result set of the probe. So now I just tell that our new rule will use data from this probe. I say I need data from this probe, and each row from the result set of this query will be checked against the condition. And if the row does not satisfy the condition, the message will be shown each time. So if I save this file policy and I get another variable f, which is a database object, I will invoke SQL Assessment on f, check file space, and pass my new rule set file policy JSON as configuration parameter. I will get two messages. So I have two files violating our rule. Which I don't get here are file names and file sizes. And this makes using this report a little bit more difficult. I can add file names, file sizes, available space ratio to this message because the rules message is not just a string, but it's a string template. And I will use column names from the result set, name, available space ratio, and the rule parameter threshold here in curly braces with that signs to let SQL Assessment API to fill these spaces with actual data. Let's see how it works. Yes, we have the file names, the threshold, the available space ratio, and their sizes. And you may notice that the available space ratio and threshold are shown as %, and total size is shown as a number rounded to 2 digits after the decimal point. And there is no magic because I have used standard .NET string format specifiers you can use in string format method for P for %, and N for number, rounded to 2 digits.
Wow, this is really cool. I haven't seen this before at all, so I'm just it's pretty cool how you kind of piece it all together. If I could just like take a step back and talk about how you might create this custom rule. It looks like first you're using definition instead of override. So that's kind of like the key, that you're creating a new one as opposed to editing an old one. And then some of the other things I noticed is you specified that this is going to be good for a SQL Server as well as a managed instance. That was pretty cool. And whether or not it's running on Windows or Linux. And then you came up with a description, and then later you used probes, which is basically kind of what I'm seeing is kind of running the data that's then going to run this test. So you have this probe that does a query that also returns certain variables that you later used in the message that actually describe, okay, this is what was wrong, this is what you were actually at. So that was really cool how you used all those different things in the message. You set the threshold, so it's very easy, it looks like, to go and update this threshold if you change your mind sometime down the line. And then you set the condition. This was really cool that I wasn't expecting you to like on the fly kind of create this. So thanks for sharing this with us. It's really, really cool. And now in this example, it looked, actually first let me pause. Did I kind of explain how you built this? Did I explain that correctly?
Yes. Exactly. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
From this point.
It's not rocket science, but it is like a few pieces you have to put together. So I appreciate the way you showed that to us.
And you can use the threshold not only to change the value when you change your mind. You can create an override for this rule later for some databases, or maybe for SQL instances of version of some older versions like 10.0, whatever.
So you could basically, instead of recreating the whole thing, you could use an override now that this exists and just update the threshold?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Very cool. So I don't necessarily have to keep track of this definition file once I create it. Cool. This is really cool, Aleksei. Thanks for sharing it with us. I have one more question. In this example, you showed us kind of how to check all the files. Is there a way to identify and check specific files? Could you show us how to do that, if it's possible?
Yes, we can do this in several ways, and I will use one. I will just add the where clause to this SQL statement, which will take only files with matching file type. And this the type is compared to a query parameter, and this query parameter becomes probes parameter automatically. And now when I say I need data from this probe, I just pass the parameter value. For example, I will find log files. Just replace it with a little bit longer specification. I use probe db file space and pass file type parameter, which is log. And this view has a file desk description column, and I will get all the files which have log string in this column. Let's check if it works. Yes, we have only log file checked and listed here. We don't assess files, data files or file stream files anymore.
Cool. So you can basically add them as parameters to your probe, which then goes into the query, which then helps you kind of filter these things out.
Yes, and this helps, for example, you to use this probe in another rule. So I may have another rule for data files or file stream files using the same probe with the same data, just like a function in programming languages.
Oh, okay, I understand.
Parameters. Yeah.
Cool. So you can leverage this probe again in a different rule.
Yes.
Cool, awesome. This has been really cool, Aleksei. Thanks for sharing this. Again, I had no idea that you were gonna go this route, but I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure our viewers really enjoyed it too. If someone is just getting started with these custom rules, do you have any tips or best practices, or how you might get started doing this?
The first place is our GitHub repo. There are some examples. The examples are described, have README, MD files, and it's a good place to start.
Awesome, cool. Well, thanks so much, Aleksei. I'm going to bring everyone back up here. We also have Alex and Ebru. I just want to spend a moment to say, wow, this is really cool. I didn't know what we were really getting into today, but I really had a great time. I wanted to, pass it, and maybe we can kind of hear from all of you. I'd love to hear, any tips and tricks. Like Aleksei shared his tips on how to get started, and he actually showed us a bunch of tips on how to go about creating these custom rules. But Ebru or Alex, if you have any tips on some best practices or even some gotchas or things you want to share with our viewers that might be helpful.
I would say just go ahead and try it. Just go to the GitHub page, we have a quick start tutorial, the simplest way to run the assessment in PowerShell. Just start. Or if you don't care about PowerShell, go to the extension in Azure Data Studio. Alex showed you, it's very simple. A couple of clicks, you have the extension, and then you can just click and try it. Once you try and once you see the recommendations, I think then you can think about how to apply it to your own internal processes, right? Do you run it every week? Who looks at the results? How does it get incorporated into your internal processes, basically? But just to start with, just either PowerShell or extension, just try it once on your system.
Awesome, thanks, Ebru. Alex, do you have any best practices or tips from your experience, obviously working with the extension?
Yeah, not like best practices, but I just to emphasize that we really need feedback, because this solution is like work in progress yet, and we're working pretty actively on it right now, and we really need feedback. So we always engage to use our GitHub page to learn more how to use it, to learn more how to start with SQL assessment with any kind of, PowerShell or extension, or creating your own rules. And so, yeah, I just want to we get some more feedback in order to understand what's really important for our customers and what we should work what we should consider like our first priority in this solution.
Awesome, thanks, Alex. And is the best place for that feedback going to be in the GitHub repository?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, great, thanks so much. I just wanted to share a few things. We've been getting kind of a lot of questions from all over the place. One comment which kind of echoes how I feel was from Monica on YouTube. Monica said, "This is awesome," and I agree. This is pretty cool. I think other comments from our viewers are around is this available for other types of assessments, like vulnerability assessment? I know that's not something you guys necessarily work on, but we did get a few questions about it. So would any of you want to comment on that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, vulnerability assessment is a separate service available in Azure, and they focus on security. So our assessment is like general best practices around configuration. So if you want more security focused things, you should use vulnerability assessment. And we are working closely with those guys. But if you want just general best practices recommendation, Assessment API is your way.
Gotcha. Thanks, Ebru. One question we got, which from Learn TV, someone asked if it's possible to use this to check if specific security patches or fixes have been applied to my SQL servers. I'm wondering if this is kind of in the realm of possibility.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we do have a rule that checks for latest CU, cumulative update for SQL Server. So we already have that, but if you wanted to write your own rule and make sure, the server is at a certain version level, you can definitely do that.
Okay, awesome. Very cool. Thanks, Ebru. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. If anyone has any questions, feel free to go ahead and post them on Learn TV. In the meantime, I just wanted to throw up a few resources. I think the main resource to check is the GitHub page. This is what everyone showed during their demos. This is where you can find all the information about the different rules, about how to customize the rules, and even provide feedback, which Alex said is going to be so important moving forward. There's also a blog that you all did recently about the SQL Assessment API. Actually, I think this one is focused on the extension, so this might also be a good one to check out. With that being said, I am going to kind of sign us off. I really appreciate you all coming on the show, so just thank you again. I learned a lot. I think our viewers probably did too. And if you're viewing this and you have questions later, feel free to leave a comment, leave a like, give us feedback on GitHub. And we're really looking forward to seeing you next time on Data Exposed.
Yeah, thanks,
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.